Okay, class. Now, remember we had three muscle types: skeletal, cardiac, and smooth. Skeletal, cardiac, and smooth. A&P1, we dedicate more to skeletal muscle. You'll even be learning a few muscles. A&P2, I talk more on smooth muscle, like in blood vessels and everything, and the heart. Actually, the heart comes up early for me in A&P2. So we have three muscle types: skeletal, cardiac, and smooth. I'm going to briefly talk on smooth. I'm not going to dedicate a lot to that. I was dedicating more to the skeletal. Now remember, let's go back to what I said before. Skeletal and cardiac muscle are striped. We call striated. Review. Because the myofilaments are in a myofibril pattern. The myofilaments are in a myofibril pattern. These, the myofilaments, are not. Therefore, it looks smooth under the microscope. Okay? All right. So let's go further now. So smooth muscle. Where do we find smooth muscle? We find smooth muscle in hollow organs, not the heart, because that's cardiac. So in other words, let's just think about it. Our bladder, our intestines, blood vessels, trachea, all that stuff like that there, smooth muscle. Usually has two layers, but not necessarily. A longitudinal and circular. Longitudinal goes to the length, circular, but not always now. Not always. That's just okay. I then go to kind of my bullet points I wanted to say on smooth muscle. All right. These are the highlight points. Can be stimulated by the autonomic motor neurons. See, somatic motor neurons did the skeletal. Remember that. But with skeletal muscle, the only thing that could turn it on was neurons. I'm going to say it again. With skeletal muscle, the only thing that could turn it on was neurons. Nothing else. Nothing else. Not hormones, not nothing. But with smooth muscle, it's turned on by a whole plethora of different things. The autonomic motor neurons, certain hormones can do it, other chemicals can do it. Mechanical stretch, if you pull on it, like the bladder, stretch the bladder and it reflexively comes back. In some cases, it can even be self-stimulated. Now, here's another key point I want you to hear now. Needs calcium ions from the outside of the cell to contract. Now, let me tell you what the importance of that. The importance of that is, and you listen to me well, skeletal muscle, all the calcium is inside the cell for contraction. I'll say it again. Skeletal muscle, all the calcium for contraction is inside the cell. When it comes to smooth muscle, and I'll throw in cardiac, when it comes to smooth muscle and cardiac, some of the calcium must come from the outside. Quite a bit. So what you have in smooth muscle and cardiac in the cell membrane are calcium channels. Calcium channels. Now this becomes big in pharmacology. Therefore, if we gave a calcium channel blocker, it would relax smooth muscle and cardiac. The calcium channels, when I get an A&P2 in smooth, are a little bit different than cardiac. So I could give a calcium channel blocker for cardiac, which would weaken contraction, bring your blood pressure down. Or I could give a calcium channel blocker for smooth muscle, and let's say that would relax the smooth muscle for some reason. So, but I can't do that in skeletal muscle because all of the calcium, is already inside the muscle cell. Okay, no troponin. Remember in skeletal with an I, C, and T, you don't have that. So if you don't have troponin, calcium is going to hook to something else called calmodulin. You still need calcium, obviously, but it's going to hook to something called calmodulin. The thick filaments have heads all along the entire length. See, with the others, it was only 2 heads per that myosin. With these, that means you can come in and still keep tension because you grab the next head on the same molecule, grabs, The greatest endurance of all three muscle types. Many people ask the question, they think the heart, but the heart beats and rests. But your bladder cannot do that. It has to constantly. So it has the greatest endurance of all three muscle types. And it contracts in kind of a twisted pattern, corkscrew. All right, let's go further. So here was this here showing what you got. Peristalsis. Okay, peristalsis is a milking action. So in your intestines, you squeeze the material to the next area, which is relaxed. Then you squeeze that to the next area. That's what we call peristalsis. Alternating contractions of smooth muscles that mix and squeeze. So it squeezes along. Longitudinal layer contracts and organ dilates and so forth. Okay? All right. Microscopic anatomy of this, okay? Microscopic anatomy of this is a spindle-shaped cell, thin and short, connective tissue. You only have an endomysium, which is just about around the muscle cells. The sarcoplasmic reticulum is less developed because remember, the sarcoplasmic reticulum stored calcium. You get most of it from the outside. Okay? You pinch the calcium off in something called calveoli. So the membrane kind of pinches the calcium. No sarcomeres, remember, because we don't have the myofibril. Don't have myofibrils, and you don't have T-tubules. The T-tubules, remember, help to bring the action potentials in so you can do the calcium. You don't need that. Okay, let's go further. So we have that. Here's this. Don't need that. Okay. Autonomic nerves. Okay. Now, instead of the neuromuscular junction you had in skeletal muscle, you have these varicosities, these bulbous endings that go all up in there. So this is the end of the autonomic neuron, but instead of having a synaptic and bulb, you have a bunch of these little things that kind of goes up all between the smooth muscle, these varicosities here. Okay. The thick to thin filaments. See, in skeletal is, let's say, a 1 to 2, but in this is a 1 to 13. That's weaker. Because the more, the smaller the ratio, the more strength. Okay? Thick filaments have heads along. Okay, we talked about that. All right? Myofilaments are spirally arranged. See, there's no myofibril. You have dense bodies in there. Let's see what we got here. So I'm going to go to this picture. You have these dense bodies, and here are intermediate filaments here. See, that's one reason it has good endurance is because you contract. It's like somebody lifting a stack of books and then putting it on a shelf. So you no longer have to contract. So once you squeeze down in a corkscrew fashion, instead of having to keep using the actin and myosin, you just shorten these intermediate filaments and it holds the tension. That means you don't have to keep doing the ATP thing. Because if you do the contraction and then you hand it to the intermediate filaments, see what I'm saying? This would transmit it to the intermediate filaments. During contraction, the silent filament mechanism involving thickening generates tension that is transmitted to this. These in turn pull on the dense bodies attached to causing a lengthwise shortening. So that kind of holds the tension instead of you having to do a constant contraction type of thing and use up ATP. Now this picture here shows that calcium channel. This calcium has to come in. As a matter of fact, even to release it from the sarcoplasmic reticulum, you need the calcium to come in. So that extracellular calcium is real important in not only smooth, but cardiac too. And we'll be seeing that in ANP too. I'll be hitting that heavy. Okay, that picture we've just seen. Here's a picture of the muscle again. Intermediate filaments. Here are the calveoli, which pinch off the calcium as it comes in. Now, smooth muscle is hooked up by gap junctions. This is what we call electrical coupling. Because think about it. If you had let's say your intestine, okay, and you want your intestine to squeeze down and push the contents to the next area. You don't want one side of the intestine intestine squeeze and the other side not, because it would just flop. The stuff needs to concentrically squeeze down. So the only way to get that occurring is to hook a lot of these skeletal muscles by gap junctions so the signal can consistently, listen to me, the signal can consistently go to all of them and squeeze down. It can consistently. So when we look at it, we want the whole thing to squeeze down. We want one side to not and then just flop the stuff in there. Okay? So that's where we get into that. All right. Here's it contracting. See how it kind of corkscrews down? Okay. Contraction. Slow synchronize. Electrically coupled together. Gap junctions. All right. Chemical and neural stimuli. Okay. Sliding filament. Increased calcium. And see what happens is the calcium won't get real heavy. It binds to calmodulin. There's no troponin. And then you activate a kinase which splits ATP. Okay. So again, just some concepts to hit. All right, here's the calcium coming in. Again, there's that calcium. This is showing the calcium activating calmodulin. And don't get real heavy. And this activates to split, get a kinase enzyme. A kinase enzyme, by definition, innervates a protein that needs to be. So you would take an ATP, and you'd have a kinase enzyme, and the phosphate would then go and hook to the protein to give it energy. That's what a kinase enzyme does. Then you would have the cocking back of the myosin heads. So some of this is similar to what you had, and you can see that, to what you had in skeletal muscle. Okay. Here again, control of this, calcium calmodulin. You can glance at that in my PowerPoint. Okay. Very energy efficient. Remember we said it has the greatest endurance of all. It uses a slow ATPase. Mild filaments may maintain a latch state. That's what I was talking about, giving it to the intermediate filaments. Relaxation requires calcium detachment from calmodulin, and then you have to shoot the calcium back out. Okay? All right. Neurotransmitter, like I said, it's working off the autonomic. Okay? And this here, you have to release off the receptors, just like we did with skeletal. So some of this is very similar. Hormones can do it. Certain hormones can cause this. Epinephrine, for example, which is a hormone, adrenaline, can cause vasoconstriction, closing down of the blood vessels. That's smooth muscle. Special features, stress relaxation response. Stress relaxation response. So here, see, here's the types of smooth muscle. I'm going to come here. Now, smooth muscle, let me come over here. Smooth muscle can do hyperplasia. All right, let me bring that up. Remember, skeletal muscle can't do mitosis, but smooth can. So like in pregnancy, the uterus has smooth muscle, and you will get increased amounts of muscle, like in the uterus during pregnancy. So it can do some mitosis. Okay. Types of smooth muscle. I'm going to end here, and we're going to start right there at types of smooth muscle, and then we're going to also talk about this.